All right, Steve. Uh, we launched a military action in Yemen this week. Can you explain why Yemen?
Sure. The Yemen is home to the Houthis, which is an Iran-backed splinter group in Yemen that's been part of the sort of civil war, the ongoing fighting in Yemen for a long time. And the Houthis have been very active in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre in Israel, stoking regional tensions, choking off commercial shipping lanes, committing attacks against American, Israeli, and allied interests. And this series of strikes comes after a much longer series of warnings that seemed to have done virtually nothing. I think you talk to most national security experts, certainly most center-right national security experts, and they will say this took way, way, way too long. We had a weak statement out last week from the Biden administration, coordinated with allies, in effect saying, "Hey, Houthis, you really need to let up on your attacks on commercial ships, and if you don't, there will be consequences," without actually really spelling out what the consequences were. I think that warning, even as a warning, was seen as very weak. And at the time, I think you had serious people, including some Democrats, saying, why are we giving this kind of a warning? Why are we not striking the Houthis now in response to their attacks on American interests? And it was pretty clear that it wasn't going to do anything. I think it may have had the sort of paradoxical effect of pushing the Biden administration into actually having to do something, because the statement itself was so weak and seen as so inadequate that when more attacks came, despite them having put out a statement, and despite these warnings, they really felt compelled to act. This is, the Houthis and the attacks from them, the chaos that they are trying to create, is just one piece of the broader set of provocations that we've seen from Iran. And we've seen, Iran-backed groups attacking in the north. We've seen Iran-backed groups attacking in the south. We've seen Iran-backed groups targeting U.S. bases and facilities in the region, including in Iraq and Syria. Iran has shown that it's not afraid of escalating. And everything that we've seen from the Biden administration has demonstrated that they're deathly afraid of escalation. And I think that the irony of what we've seen in the Biden administration reaction is that because they're so afraid of escalation, and telling people that they're so afraid, and showing people on the daily that they're so afraid of escalation, we've seen escalation, because weakness invites further provocation from our enemies.
What's the end game here, though? Like, as you say, the Houthis are funded and an arm of Iran, but we're not attacking Iran. I'm curious how you think we would even be able to take on Iran directly, but we're not going to also end the Houthis, I'd imagine. What, we're just trying to scare them back into being small ball annoyances rather than slightly larger ball annoyances?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, I don't know that there's a strategy. So I can't hazard a guess at what the strategy would be. I would love to think, on the optimistic side, that what we've seen overnight is the beginning of a strategy, that we're going to say to the Houthis, you can't do this. And if you do this, you'll be severely punished. So stop. I think we can send the same message to Iran in a strategic way, without, having to resort to kind of over the top, heavy provocation, something that look like the United States is getting enmeshed in a deeper war in the region. But we can't be so afraid of that possibility that we just say, yeah, do whatever you want. We had a really terrific piece from a Georgetown professor last week, Matthew Kronig, laying this out, and saying, in effect, we have to show them that we're serious about this, and that we won't allow this kind of aggression. to go unpunished. And I think it was a look. I was in the same place before I read the piece, but it was a very persuasive piece, I think, to people who weren't. And we've seen, I think, the problems with this kind of wishy-washy non-leadership. You know, in the Obama administration, there was the phrase that became famous. It was, I think, used by a top Obama advisor on background to describe Obama's approach to second-term diplomacy, and it was leading from behind. I'm not sure we're even doing that in this current situation, and I think it shows. I think we're seeing the challenges.
Jonah, this feels like Iran whack-a-mole to me. Iran funds all sorts of these types of groups. And so as these groups, again, like annoy us and affect our shipping lanes, etc., then we whack that group. But we're not getting to the root here. So the groups are still going to keep popping up. They're still going to keep harassing Americans and American interests. And is that it? We whack the moles occasionally? Like, what would be a better system?
Well, I agree. I frankly think a better system would be attacking Iran and ignoring the Houthis. Because the Houthis, there are a bunch of people who've been making this argument. The Houthis benefit from this attack. They've kind of, they've been screwing up domestically. This gives them more prestige in the region than they've ever had before. Like the Americans and the British are coming after us. That means we matter, right? And it's always worth pointing out. It's not entirely germane to this, but it's worth pointing out to people that the Houthis, their slogan is "Death to America, death to Israel, and a curse upon the Jews." So, like, they've got an ideological thing going on that is bolstered, where the world's biggest power is attacking them for attacking Israel. And
yeah, I mean, it's like the line in Hamilton, "Burr, you disgust me." Oh, so you've discussed me.
Right. Like, exactly. Yeah. And so if you're going to go all founding fathers on this, it's also worth pointing out that we would not have a frickin' constitution were it not for the need to open a can of whoop ass on the Barbary pirates. And this is so central to, I mean, forget being the world's policeman, world superpower, and all that stuff, leader of the free world. Like, this is so integral to the self-understanding of America from its founding as a commercial republic that cares about the free movement of commerce around the world and open shipping lanes. We had to stop this, and we should have stopped it a lot earlier. And
should we do letters of marque and reprisal again? Because that could be pretty fun.
He
how
loves
excited
his
to get
letters of marque and reprisal.
But just look, at the end of the day, if the Houthis benefit from this, you got to go after the people who would not benefit from being attacked, and that's Iran. And I don't think the problem, and I agree with Steve entirely. I think Israel has, this is a point that a couple people were making on the commentary podcast, like, Biden has an okay and defensible strategy about Israel. And you can criticize it, but it's a real thing. He's letting Israel do what it needs to do, even if he makes noise that makes it sound like he's madder than he really is and all that. They don't have a strategy about Iran. They just don't know what to do. And
it's containment. I mean, there is a strategy. It's don't get into a war with Iran.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're the one with a lot of nuclear weapons and a giant ass navy, and they should be afraid of us escalating. We shouldn't be afraid of them escalating.
Correct.
And that's the mess that we're in, is that they've concluded.
Wait, why should they be afraid of? Why should they be afraid
of us escalating?
What do they lose? This isn't a democratic society where they might not win the next election.
I don't know. For the last 15 years, every few years, there are mass street protests that threaten the stability of the regime, inviting a war with the United States that they would lose, right? I don't want to have a war with Iran, but they should be more afraid of a war with America than we should be afraid of a war with Iran. They would lose that war. That war would be conducted virtually entirely in their neighborhood, not necessarily all on their land, but our soil, because they would do things in Israel and whatnot. But the war would be over there. It wouldn't be over here. And if we were serious about it, it would end fairly quickly on our terms. And they should be more afraid of that.
Israel.
Well, they don't have one yet. Give the Obama plan time and they'll
You
get
sure
one.
about that? Yeah.
No, but look, do I think the Netanyahu government, would they be upset if we went to war with Iran? Probably not. But anyway, my only point is, I don't want to have a war with Iran. My only point is that we have more options to say, don't pull on Superman's cape, than we've remotely applied in all of this. And that vacuum of decisiveness is what has invited these people to attack the shipping lanes, the second most important waterway in the world. I mean, the Suez Canal matters. It's like the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal. That's like, I don't know, $20 trillion of trade is impinged one way or another through all that stuff.
You also have to put this in the context of the broader Biden administration approach to Iran, which was a failure. I mean, it was foolish from the beginning. They sort of undid the Trump administration's maximum pressure efforts, pulled back sanctions all over the place, chose to not enforce other sanctions, gave Iran access to billions and billions of dollars that Iran didn't have access to before, that had been frozen. Every signal, including on the record statements from senior administration officials, was, we are looking for this kind of rapprochement with Iran because we want to get back to an Iran deal, because we think that that's what will slow their nuclear progress. That didn't work. I think we can announce that a failure at this point. And the problem is the Iranians were paying careful attention throughout all of that, and understand this is a Biden administration that wants that kind of outcome, and has made very clear that it doesn't want any serious provocation or any deeper entanglement there. We can all understand why the United States might be reluctant to become further enmeshed in military conflict in the region. Totally get it. But you can't let that drive you into making non-decisions or bad decisions. And I think
this is always
for a
the
long
problem.
time, we made bad decisions. The Biden administration made bad decisions for the better part of 3 years. And now it feels to me like they're choosing not to make decisions. And by choosing not to make decisions, that's a decision. And it's obvious to everybody what they're doing and why they're afraid.
I would disagree with you in this respect. They weren't making bad decisions. They were making easy decisions, because the easier thing to do and the more politically expedient thing to do is to ignore the problem,
Right.
because you don't want to, get into an aggression with another country like Iran, for instance. And so you ignore it because you can. And this is the problem, is that you end up in a far, far more dangerous position, a worse position, because now what are your choices? To go to war with Iran? No, but you've still got to stop this. Versus if you went back in time, of course, there were much better decisions, but not easier ones to be made 3 years ago.
But by bad decisions, I mean things like pulling back on sanctions enforcement. I mean, whatever you thought of the Trump administration.
It's easier not to enforce stuff. It's easier not to have to do, right? This is like entropy.
Yeah, to a certain extent. But then you pile on that the bad decisions to take affirmative steps to free up Iranian frozen funds, $6 billion. I mean, we said every time we talked about it, we said, money is fungible. That money can be used to cause trouble in the region. I mean, it's like all of these things that everybody understood. And the Biden administration very defiantly said, no, you're not sophisticated. You don't understand how this works. And it turns out maybe the critics did understand how this works, and maybe the Biden administration didn't.
Yeah, I will say that I think Sarah's point is right in this regard. It's like the smart decision is often the harder decision, right? And so, like, the analogy to me that pops into mind is with Trump. How many times did the GOP have the opportunity to say, all right, let's just be done with this guy. Let's go along with the impeachment, right? Let's do whatever, and those exit ramps presented themselves, and they had short-term immediate pain that they decided to avoid in favor of longer term, more intense and horrific pain in the future. And that's where we are. It's the same thing with Iran.